few minutes early here. We'll give people a few more minutes to log in, but it's good to see a few people in the group. You know?
I found a Ragnar.
Awesome.
Oh, you don't have. Oh, yeah. I guess he just plays.
And it's informal, guys. If you don't want to wear a hat, a chain, whatever, I'm all good. Just 1 second. I'm gonna do one more thing.
Hello, Mercy.
Just hold.
Or should I say hello, Your Excellency?
Hello, Your Excellency.
Shh, I'm incognito.
Zoom.
Thank you.
Your Majesty, would you like to be pinned or would you like to have a gallery view?
Let's go ahead and do a gallery view. So we can kind of see everybody. There's not so many people in this that I think that it won't work. And then... give people just a few more minutes as they start trickling in.
Playing the volume.
We're giving everyone a minute.
Ragnar's playing with our dog. That's what you're seeing.
Oh, there you go. All right. I'm going to do one more thing, guys, and then I'm all yours. I just want
to... Oh, it's good time.
Okay. Now I'm all in on this. All right, guys, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you guys can show us your wonderful face, please feel free to turn your video on. It's actually a conversation, so it can be real. So good to see you, Nick. Oh, looking dapper in the code RD there, Black Wolf, I got to say.
Your Majesty, it's good to see you.
It's so good to see you, and thanks for the message back this morning. It was nice to hear from you. So guys, a shift chat is, it's as much as it's formal, it's informal. And what the great thing about a Shiv chat is there's not one direction this conversation can go. There's lots of directions. And so the first thing I like doing in a Shiv chat is to talk about the nightly virtues and kind of start with that. And so there's lots of really good lists of the nightly virtues, but I'm going to pull us, if I can't share my screen here, to show you guys a particular website, because I think this website does and you know what, I'm not the host, I cannot share. How would I share?
I'll be able to share your screen, Your Majesty. I just opened it up.
All right, you just opened it up. Okay, can you guys see my screen now? So you should see Chasing the 7 Nightly Virtues. Do you guys have that on the screen?
Do not.
Not yet, Your Majesty.
Okay, we're coming to it. So it'll come up in a second. And so what's great about this is on Fortune's Wheel on Weebly. It's a site. It's actually through Vitus Onziger's household in the Middle Kingdom. If you don't know who Vitus is, he's a really interesting knight. And so what makes him interesting is he was joked about as being the angry garden gnome of the Mid-Realm. He was a punk rocker, a wild guy, and did a lot of things. At the same time, he found chivalry, and he was amazing in these areas and wrote some really interesting books. He also wrote a book called The Anvil of Virtue, and I highly recommend this book. In a lot of ways, it's a much more accessible tone when you're talking about your virtues and a path to chivalry and these things. And you can find that book on Goodreads, and it's a treatise on SCA combat by Sir Vitus, but it says Cern Garrison, but it's Sir Vitus is his SCA name. I think Cern Garrison is his mundane name. So can you guys see the screen yet or no?
Not yet for me.
Not yet. Okay. No. If we can't get it up, it's not a big deal. So guys, what I'm looking at right now is Fortune's Wheel on Weebly.com, Chasing the 7 Nightly Virtues, and it Sir Jamie von Anzinger put this up, musing on chivalry and recreation and martial competition. And what I love about this is he talks about several lists, and it's important to understand that when we talk about the nightly virtues, there isn't one list. And so Shiv today on a modern list lists courage, justice, mercy, generosity, faith, nobility, and hope. Vitus lists courage, justice, mercy, generosity, loyalty, faith. Loyalty and faith are together, nobility and hope. And then Garrick von Kupke did a treatise on this on the Chronique at one point. Courage, mercy, generosity, faith, franchise, or nobility, same thing really, is what he's saying in this, or how he's listing it. Hope, prowess, and loyalty. And again, that's a slightly longer or slightly different list. And then if you scroll down in this, you can see Lull's list, where Lull lists fortitude, justice, mercy, charity, faith, prudence, hope. Aquinas says fortitude, mercy, charity, faith, prudence, and hope as well. So I'm going to grab this link, and what I can do, because sharing the screen is not working out as well as it could, is almost if I can't put this in the chat. There's a chat function in this, correct? And then you guys can get this link. And really what this is about is getting you guys some information and letting you peruse that information. I just threw that link in there. Let me know, guys, if someone can try to make sure that works and it's getting out to you, because that's important. And so the reason why I share that is I like that it's somebody talking about it in a couple different terms. And I think there's not one way to be chivalric. I think there's many versions of chivalry. And one of the things that is in my path to chivalry that I'm going to talk a lot about a little bit is that when I got knighted, I had a hard time getting knighted. And so for some of you who've only ever known me as Duke Uther, there was a period where, let's say I wasn't maybe the most loved man in the kingdom and couldn't get knighted for love or money. And as I struggled in my path to knighthood, I was not the only one. The second link here, by the way, I just put up is the Goodreads to the Anvil of Virtue. So both of those links will help you out. So in my path to my knighthood, we had a period in the SCA in the West Kingdom, I would say, where chivalry was in a very formatted thing. And originally when the SCA kind of started, it was Tolkien, it was King Arthur, it was Ivanhoe, and this mismatch and this large thought of all these different ways to be chivalric and what was chivalry. And it was this really wide net trying to catch everybody. And then there's a period in the West Kingdom where it really came down to the chronique, the 14th century, wearing a bascinet and looking a certain way in your franchise or displaying yourself in a certain way. And the reality is the chivalric branch, or chivalry, the branch of chivalry, the chivalric tree has many branches. There's a heroic age. There's a Viking age where the Vikings had their own very defined code of chivalry. And then you come into the 14th century that really Eleanor de Aquitaine and the court really formalize it. And then you go past that more into like the Renaissance, you start seeing reenactments of chivalry and courts that are playing at chivalry. And it's all relevant because that informs our modern ideal on chivalry. But okay, so if you guys can pull your cameras on, because I want to see some faces, and we're going to do some hands up, hands down. Who here has ever looked up the knightly virtues?
I have.
Who's Googled it? Everyone here Googled that at some point? Excellent. Who here has read like Lull or a treatise on chivalry in depth? Okay. Excellent. Okay, so for those of you who haven't, it's not important that you read a tome, right? What is important is you get the concepts and aspects of chivalry down. There's lots of ways to get that. To be quite frank, I've never read all the way through Lull. I've perused it. I've perused several books on chivalry. I've read several books on William the Marshal's life. There's a really great book on William the Marshal called William the Marshal, A Flower of Chivalry. It's almost a pamphlet. It's about his life. And then I've read a Sharon K. Pinn book about his life. And in that, there's a story, and you see how chivalry applies to things and wraps it around. It's not just an esoteric concept. I'm Irish. I like stories. I believe the Iliad or the Cain Cooley and the Great Cattle Raid and the sagas were there to teach you lessons. And I don't think that's any less present in modern chivalry and in 14th century. And so you have these stories of Roland, right? To hear the story of Roland told by a bard was to inform you on what it is to be a noble man, or to embody these chivalric concepts, right? So today, the easiest pill I'm going to show you is Sir Nigel and the White Company. And this other one is the White Company, and this is called Sir Nigel. They're two books. A lot of times you can get them in one book together. I was just emailed this by a friend, one of my friends is Knight Duke Sean of Artemisia, because all the cool knights have read this book. If you've not read Sir Nigel, you're just missing out. You're not studying your chivalry, because here's why. It's the romantic ideal of chivalry that we find most present in the SCA, I think. And it doesn't matter if you're a Viking or if you're a 14th century guy or a launch connect. If you want to be a knight and you got a little Sir Nigel in you, you're probably coming a little closer to things. And I say that, and it sounds like a bold statement, but all my favorite knights have read Sir Nigel, and they find something they like about it, and we can relate. And ultimately, when you come to Knights Council, the knights are never going to agree on what the order of chivalry, or if you talk to one knight and he writes down the virtues of chivalry, the order they put them in and the order of importance to each knight will be different. And that's totally okay, because not every knight is going to be the knight for everybody. You're going to be a knight that you are. You're going to hearken to a few different virtues. You're going to be horrible at a couple of them. I oftentimes hear a lot of knights are horrible at chastity. No names named, just saying, and we're all trying to be the best knights we can be. And some knights are going to be better at these things. And then the thing I've really experienced in my life is the 20-year-old me put prowess way higher. And right now, in my 50-year-old me is thinking faith is up there, because believing when things can work out or believing things come through and following through on things a lot of times took a lot of faith. And I never gave it the credit in my life that believing it would work or having faith and other people having faith in me, that gave me a lot. And so that's a long ramble about chivalry. But now I want to hear from some of you guys some questions. So if you guys, the first question I'm going to throw out there, who here has had a great fireside chat about chivalric virtues? Anyone had that possible? All right. Okay. So I'm going to say this. It's also important to remember it doesn't have to be a knight throwing the thing. You can throw the party and have a chivalric chat and do it over a bottle of wine and invite 5 squires over. Doesn't need a knight to make it happen. Be empowered to talk about chivalry, discuss it, and know that there's not a wrong answer, and to speak up. The last thing, a story I'm going to leave you with. You guys all know Duke Miles, right? Everybody know Miles? Hard to miss the guy. Loud, obnoxious. He was one of mine. I did the best I could to polish the rough edges off. That was a lot of polishing, let me tell you. True story, Miles hates reading. He hates reading so much that he never read law. But what I did is his night, when I realized his Achilles heel was reading, is I held a series of chivalric chats at Rockridge fight practice afterwards at Barclays that a dozen knights attended all the time because it was fun to do. And we drank beer and we cut it up about chivalry. And at the end of 3 months, Miles had heard 50 views on chivalry and he could inform his own opinion. And so that's one of the things here, is that when you think about these topics, there's no wrong thing. So, all right, Your Highness of Snogwa, seeing how I woke you up for this, give me your favorite knightly virtue. And give me a little bit of why. And don't look for the answer that's going to please the crowd. Just tell me what you really like, your gut. What I want, this is my number one. I'm trying to get this one down.
Hospitality.
Hospitality is an excellent one. And how else could you go ahead and talk about why?
The biggest thing is, especially as a relatively newcomer to the SCA for us both, is that we still get to see the hospitable nature to people that don't really know us. Mm-hmm. The people that truly go out of their way to welcome us and to help us feel involved. But we also see the opposite reaction. We roll up to a event where we aren't really known, before we put on our garb. Mm-hmm. And we can kind of get the cold shoulder from some people. So that's a virtue I tend to really focus on. Because as that newcomer, I know how important it is to feel welcome and wanted and appreciated. So if I can take my time to make that one person feel welcome, then I've done my job.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so hospitality is a knightly quality for sure. Mm-hmm. It's generally not listed as a knightly virtue. Mm-hmm. But there are knightly virtues close to it. So if we were to look back to the lists I had up a minute ago, and we were to go to Vitus, Shiv today, or Garrick, they would use the word generosity, possibly. Mm. And generosity of person and spirit would cover the thing that's very important to you. So if you were to express this in a Shiv circle, a knightly quality would be hospitality, but your favorite knightly virtue would probably be generosity. You also might say franchise or nobility or noblesse oblige, which shows up on some lists, and that is the obligation of being noble, of hosting other people, of being generous. Right. Those things cross over a little bit. And then when we go down to the list by Lull or Aquinas, they both have charity, but they don't really have a hospitality in there. And so it's, again, chivalry is an evolving thing. There's no wrong thing. There's no wrong answer. But what I would say is the quality you're really looking to emulate is generosity. And you might think about how that applies in other things. Because you listed out hospitality. And some people might define that as you bringing them into your home. But you said making people feel welcome, giving them of your time, and including them. And those are all qualities of generosity as well. Okay. And so you're talking about a thing. And so when you're talking about it, I only correct this not because you had the wrong answer. Mm-hmm. I want you to have a more educated answer, because I think you got the right vibe and the right spirit. And this is something we find in the SCA all the time. People have the right, like Miles as an individual is innately actually very noble in some areas and very not in others. But he was raised a very certain way, about having character, and personal character oftentimes blends in with chivalry. And so I said that. All right. Yeah. Somebody else, who else would like to give me a favorite, their virtue, and talk about it? All right, Your Excellency.
Franchise. Franchise is a very important virtue to me. It's got a lot of different levels, a lot of different layers. Mm-hmm. On the first, it's your presentation. How knightly are you in your bearing? Mm-hmm. But a lot of people stop there. As you dig deeper, it becomes a lot more about the constancy with which you employ and observe the other virtues, mm-hmm. and that in and of itself being a virtue. So
franchise has actually always been one of my top three. to be quite honest. And it also sometimes is given noblesse oblige in that. But there's a really great piece in Conan Doyle's Sir Arthur where Bohemus, or Fairhands, Sir Lancelot's son, goes to the scullery, basically through an Arthurian. I mean, all the Arthurian things start in a feasting hall, and somebody gets called out, and these things happen, right? But essentially, nobody knows he's. Is it Galahad or Lancelot's son? I'm conflating this. I believe he is. It's Galahad. Thank you. It's Galahad's son, and he goes to the scullery, and he's being made to wash dishes. And in this, he applies himself and becomes the best dishwasher possible. And the other people in the scullery hate him because he has good manners, he's polite, and he's well bred. And it's interesting. And then, of course, the court notices him, and then they say, by your bearing, you clearly are of noble birth or station, and your franchise, because as you said, it's not just what you're wearing, even though he's in dish rags and washing dishes, it's how he comported himself and treated other people. And so that's a great, in my mind, as you said, all-encompassing example of the franchise quality. And I like using that word, even though Miles insisted to me that meant McDonald's or Burger King, and we had to abuse him of that and get him over the hump. So it is modern context. And I'm abusing Miles because of my squires. He was great for stories, let me tell you. Would somebody else like to give me another knightly virtue that they hold dear? All right, Your Highness.
So mine is confidence, but it's confidence and vainglory kind of together.
Okay.
Because for me, I struggled with finding my confidence for a while. And then I found my confidence, but then I started realizing that in telling people about my fighting and stuff, I was kind of falling into that almost vainglory of I did this and this is awesome and I did this, kind of thing. And that's just, that's over the top. Right. So I've kind of now when I'm discussing things with people, because I love to talk fighting. I love to fight, so it's sort of that kind of goes hand in hand. So I'm trying to find that balance between, I had this really great experience and this happened, but what about you? How'd you feel, kind of thing. And so trying to also foster confidence in other people as well, because we do have a lot of newer fighters, or we did have a lot of newer fighters that they're also trying to find that confidence. And, I've only been fighting for 3 years. So if I can kind of help them find even just a little bit of their confidence, and then they can kind of start building on it, which is something someone did with me, is that, I had no confidence. And then a couple people kind of helped me find little pieces of it. And then I put it all together to build my own. So it's that finding the balance between, it's okay to be confident. It's a great thing to be confident, but it's when it falls into vainglory is when there starts to become an issue where people don't want to hear your stories because they're all about you, right. That's something I had an issue with in my personal life too, is I would monopolize conversations because I did this and I did this and I did, and it stopped being about a conversation and me just talking at that person. So something I've been trying to do just overall in my personal life and in, SCA and stuff is telling somebody about something, like if I have a small story, telling them that story and then going, okay, but what about you? Well, how did you feel about, and kind of thing, and trying to foster that more of that communication that can also kind of promote confidence in yourself, in your fighting, in just everything, so those are the ones that kind of stick with me. Those are the top of my list. There's a couple that are, right around that range, but those are the two.
You used the word confidence, which is an excellent knightly quality again, but what would you think would be a knightly virtue that encompasses that? Do you know? Because this is where you're close, but and again, I'm not trying to say you're wrong, but really, there's another word that would be more fitting if you're trying to use that as a knightly virtue. The virtues generally have some other are a little defined. How about courage?
Yeah.
Courage and confidence look very similar and often are the same thing, because you have to have the courage to do something or act, and that encompasses having the confidence to do things as well. And that the courage is listed on Ships Today, Vetus's list, Garrick's list. When we go down to Lull and Aquinas's, we don't have that in the same way, although we do have faith. And I think faith is also faith that you can do something. And I think faith also might be that you can, and faith that you'll be okay, regardless of the result, i.e. you'll live through the battle, even though you might not win the battle, right? Which you're coming back to do it again. And then in some aspects, you also might, instead of saying confidence, also might think fortitude to take the field, belief that you can take the field, and fortitude. Those are related, right? And so when you say confidence, it's a knightly quality, but like I'm trying to frame things in virtues, and that's part of the conversation, by the way, is to like, let's take what we think the knightly virtues are and bring them into more classic lists or things that people are going to understand what you mean a little closer. Okay. Does anybody have a virtue they struggle with they'd like to share? All right. Donovan.
Mercy.
All right. Tell me why you struggle with it. I mean, you're not known as dominant and the terrible, so I'm just curious.
Well, I think it can go both ways. I tend to hold a grudge.
Sure.
And I think that's off the field, that's something that can affect us. On the field, it's usually a little easier for me. I mean, I'm not going to go out there and blast a new guy in the armpit because there's no reason to do that. But I'll see people that do that, and I can see that that's something that a lot of people would struggle with. Is showing mercy in both ways.
Okay, so you find it's hard to show mercy because you get excited, or because you just like smashing things in the field, or is it just an on the field thing?
For me, it's not an on the field thing. It's an off the field thing. On the field, I'm pretty composed because we have rules and structure, and I'm very okay with that side of things. I've never, to my knowledge, gone overboard on someone on the field, just because it's just not what we do. It's not how I was raised to fight. But holding a grudge off the field, to me, that's part of mercy. Is that you should move on from that. You should find ways to forgive people and be merciful. And that's something that I find that I struggle with sometimes.
Mercy makes every list. And when I think about mercy, I oftentimes think about mercy as a quality, I want to say this in the right way, is to not abuse people in power. Like if you have power over somebody, is not to abuse them is the first quality of mercy. If you have power over somebody, power over a situation, whether it's a cutting word or a cutting blow, is not to be overbearing or abusive in that power. And I see what you mean by like not holding a grudge and not, letting things fulminate. That also, mercy is an interesting quality because opposite all the knightly virtue are the 7 deadly sins, and oftentimes they're direct opposites, right? And so when you lack mercy, it can come up in a couple of different ways. And so how do you apply that into the SCA? I think you've got a good handle on, not hitting somebody in the armpit or not beating them up on the field or not lighting them up in that regard. And I would think outside or off the field, I'll use Miles. Miles struggled a great deal with, Miles has a very huge sense of fair play. And I think Miles got really good calibration for a ducal level fighter who's fighting. I don't feel his ego enters his fight in that regard. He only cares about his back spinning, back fist, and looking silly. He does not necessarily care if he wins. And I think that's a great quality to have, right? Miles, for a long time, had a hard time finding when people, he didn't like someone to take a shot. He let it internalize or get into him. And in that, he wasn't really giving them the benefit of the doubt or showing mercy or forget. He'd get really worked up. And that was the only time Miles would lack mercy on the field. And when we talked about it, one of the things we said about that was you can only control you. You cannot control the thing that anybody else does. And if somebody gets under your skin, mercy, giving them mercy, you can control that. They can't, because you can't control what they did to upset you. And you might talk to them about it. You might not talk to them about it. You might just move on for it. You might avoid them because they're just a pain. But all of those things, if you can find that grace to be merciful or not to be upset over it, then maybe that'd help you. I'm not great. I'm great at understanding the basics. And I kind of say that I struggle with mercy too, because I like smashing things on the field and I play hard. And I think you should earn your own spot on the field. And if, there's no crying in baseball or fighting, I don't have, but I come up in a different generation, and also in this modern iteration of the SCA, it's changed quite a bit. And we're a little less hardcore than it was when I joined. It was a little more combat and a little less, we had rules that invited everybody, but if you got smashed, and that was on you. And we're a little less that these days. And that's probably good because it includes more people. And that shows a bit of mercy to find a way to include others, and not be rigid in who you are. So that's a good quality. I struggle with that one myself. I got to say, I don't have a firm handle on that one. So anybody else got a virtue they struggle with? Mercy.
Your Majesty, 2 questions.
Sure.
One, I struggle with hope.
Sure.
A lot. Because, even after 4 years, I think, ish fighting, sometimes I feel like I'm never going to get over that next hump. Like I'm always going to be stuck where I'm at, and I'm not going to really see any progress. So I struggle with hope, but my favorite virtue is humility, but I'm not sure where that would fit in any of these charts that you presented. So I would like to hear your side of the story on humility as well.
Sure. So, hope and faith are kissing cousins, right? I think it's interesting that like the Shiv Today list has hope and faith, and I think they're very intertwined or related. When you go down to Aquinas and Lull, they both list hope and faith. And so it's interesting to me that they split those out because, again, I would think of them as related virtues or two sides of the same coin, but maybe... But when you talk about hope, as you said, I think to have hope, you have to have a little faith in a lot of cases, because if you want to hope for something, you have to believe you're not being foolish in doing so. And I think the most important thing on having hope on something is letting go of the outcome, regardless of what your wish is. And I say that because from my experience, I hoped to get knighted, or I had faith that I would get knighted. I had both of these things going on in my head forever, and I had a hard time getting knighted. But I kept doing the right thing, or what I thought was the right thing, and taking on other counsel. And so, they talk about blind faith or, blind hope. And I think you can always hope for the best, or you can always have hope, or you can look. And I think one of the great things about hope is, unlike faith, is you often can find somebody's story that gives you hope. You can find a story of somebody else that overcame. You can look for somebody in history. You can look for a friend. You can get a partner or a buddy and help you overcome that virtue and help you in the SCA especially. And people who've shared your tribulations. There's oftentimes groups for, and I don't mean to be pejorative, but like women fighters, or, you insert the thing you're struggling with. There's somebody else out there, and you can find people to help support you in that. And that, I think, could give you hope. So that's where I would look for hope. And then what was the other term again?
Humility.
Humility. That is a great term. And honestly, when you say it, I would almost agreed with you that it would be on the list, right? Why is humility not on the list? That's a great question.
If I may, I would
Sure.
agree with Your Excellency that humility is a very important quality. Many of the knights that I look up to and I aspire to their example, humility is one of the biggest qualities that I feel they embody.
Right. So I did not read, I'm not entirely familiar with Lull and Aquinas. They're listing prudence, right? And prudence would be, wisdom in many regards, in nobility. So in Shiv Today and Vitus lists the word nobility, and then Garrick is listing franchise and nobility. And we would all agree to act noble, or to be noble in one's bearing, or to be peer-like would not to be full of, not to be a braggart, right? Not to be boastful, not to be saying too much, right? And this is actually an interesting piece because in the Viking culture, it's kind of the opposite, right? You would bust out your big drinking horn, you jump up on a table and you bang your chest and say a thing you were going to do in the sagas. And that was your bond of the thing you were going to do to be a man of worth, right? And then in the 14th century, you would do that again, but you would do that in a different way. And so gentle behavior, I believe, covers not being a braggart, and being noble. Noblesse oblige would cover not being a braggart. And so I think it's a great quality. I think it's under that umbrella personally. And that's why you don't see it on the classic lists. I would have to do a little more Googling. I went to some classic lists and then the lists I relate to. And then, in the, when you said like let's say the tree of chivalry, the heroic branch of it, or the before the 14th century, that isn't necessarily always. They don't really see things that way. Culturally, it's different, right? If you were, you made a toast and a boast, and you said what you're going to do, and if you lived up to your word, then you had word fame, and you were a man of great worth, right? And so, I think there's something there, if you look at it, that's why maybe it's not on these lists. I don't have a great answer for that. I got to be honest. I'm struggling a little bit. Anybody else want to answer that? Sure.
I actually have something. In period, humility, at least to what I've read, is a lot more about understanding your place in society and existing in that place. If you're a baron, you don't act like a king. You don't wear the king's regalia. Right. You dress this well, but you don't dress this well. In Irish culture, the higher you were in station, the more colors you wore. Mm-hmm. So if you were a bard, if you were a ree, you could wear purple. But if you weren't, you didn't. So it's respecting both where you are, those above you, and those below you. And in that, it is nobility.
I think that's the better definition than I gave. So thank you. But I think we got to the same thing, which nobility. I'd love to hear from Baron Antonio. I think he's better read on some of these later treaties than I am. And, I always like hearing what he has to say. Can I bug you for a comment, Your Excellency? I got to unmute him.
There we go. Thank you.
There you go.
Your Majesty, what His Excellency said was correct. It was instituted effectively by the church, and when the church effectively placed certain burdens upon the chivalry, the concept of being in relationship with the rest of creation and understanding who you are, like the Greek Pindar said, know who you are and be such. The church was very much an applier of that concept, and when Lowell did write, he did in fact include humility in his works. Gotcha. It may not be in a list, but it is in the book.
Gotcha.
And one of the hardest things in the world sometimes is to understand that, like all virtues, humility is the middle road. If you go too far this way, you've got someone being a braggart. It's like courage. If you go too far this way, you're a coward. If you go too far this way, you're in fact vainglorious. So it's that concept of balance and middle road. And balance was very important, not only to the Christians, but to the Greeks. The Platonic concept of justice being balance is such that it brought balance to the world if one was in relationship to all of creation.
That's an excellent, way better than I could have said it.
Your Majesty, would it be a problem if I placed my class notes? I've been teaching this class for the last 10 years in terms of chivalry, and I taught it at Grand Ithra a couple weeks ago.
Please do. I'm having an informal chat, and you're killing it. So thank you for the more thoughtful words. So there's another great story. This is a great example of, by the way, having a conversation around a fire is going to get you a lot of opinions, and oftentimes they're going to do a better dialogue and definition than you have for yourself. And mine was just improved around humility, and as we relate it to nobility, as it's obviously humility is a knightly quality, and then how does it relate to the virtues? I have a question. Does anyone struggle with any of the virtues as they exist in a practical sense in the SCA? Or have any questions? How do you apply that practically to the SCA?
I do.
Sure, let's hear it.
So justice.
Sure.
That's a really big one right now. And it's not just, formal or informal. It's just making sure that things are done justly and done right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things that, we see day to day, even at events that we may not agree with. Mm-hmm. And then it falls down into courage about how do we address those and approach those. Mm-hmm. I see for a lot of people who are, non-peers or, don't really feel they have the voice to speak up, then maybe someone who is being inappropriate or not following, their oath or, the expectations of their peerage. Mm-hmm. Especially within the, last couple of years, I saw it a lot. And now with especially everything going on, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about, strictly the sense of the FCA about, at what point do you step forward and shoot yourself in the foot by doing the right thing, which I've never had a problem doing personally. The right thing is far more important to me than anything else. But
I don't think it's that easy to say that. I think we all, as you said, you're already saying there's pause in that, right? And you called it shooting yourself in the foot. And if you're calling it that, but you're doing it anyways, then obviously there's a struggle there, right? And so, but I would like to speak to justice in the SCA because I think it's important. So first off, you can chastise somebody, right? And you can do a thorough job of that, but you may not receive any correction of behavior because you've shamed, you've persecuted, and you've attacked somebody. And to be honest with you, you said mundanely. I see a lot of that mundanely. I don't see a lot of what I would call generous conversations. And so and I'll use the simplest one, which comes up a lot. Calibration is often debated, right?
Right.
How you approach somebody in a calibration conversation is really relevant. And so first off, you got to be honest and forthright, but not overbearing. So when someone asks you what you think, you should have the heart or the room or the courage, right, to say, I thought it was pretty good. I'm going to leave that to you, though. And by doing that, you've not said, oh, that was good, you should take it, because that feels differently, right? And you've pushed somebody into a corner, and that is a bad way to manage yourself on the field. And going back to Donovan, that's not giving somebody, that's not being generous or merciful, or that's overbearing, right? And so that is something, and then know that they can choose their own level of pain. You can always crack them harder again, or you can embarrass them, right? And if you can't, that's your moment to be heroic. And I say that because it's not just about hitting somebody hard. It's about proving a point and being noble in your bearing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think justice is very important. I like Connor Whiteson. He's a Duke that I admire a great deal. I think he's got just a great moral character about him. And one thing about Connor is if he's done something on or off the field, Connor will talk to you, but he'll do first thing, I hear people say, I don't like people doing it behind the woodshed. People shouldn't be taken out of that. I'm like, I totally disagree. I don't think you should shame somebody in public. I think you should pull that person aside and give them the grace to correct their behavior, talk to them, have a conversation where they don't feel threatened, and the opportunity for improvement exists, right? And that's seeking justice, and that won't shoot yourself in the foot, right? Now, if that person doesn't correct, continues being a bore, you can offer gentle counsel, or you could just not have them in your pavilion for a beer. And I know that sounds funny, but I'm not going to post on Facebook about how I'm not letting so-and-so in my pavilion, he's never allowed there again, and he's a cat of a person, unless he really is a danger versus distasteful, right? If this guy is known for being rapey, that's a totally different safety, right? That's a different level. But if somebody is distasteful, I just don't have them around for dinner, and that's okay too. And so when you're seeking justice, I think it's important to have levels of seeking justice, right? I think it's important to not to put yourself in the judge position, but to actually invite conversation, to allow room for improvement. And in that, I think you'll get more of what you want. And this is something I think in the SCA right now that I think people are falling down on, because I've seen a lot of people, for lack of a better word, throwing away a 50% or an 80% ally where people agree more or less, right, on some topics. And maybe they not using the right words or saying it differently, or they feel uncomfortable. And then there's a pile on, and then that person never gets a chance to correct because they feel resentful. and they're carrying that around. And now you haven't changed their mind. You've made them hide their behavior, and you've built resentment. And so if you're seeking justice in the SCA, I think as it applies, that's how I apply justice in the SCA, or I think about it. It's not a knight's duty. That being said, when it comes to personal safety, attacking somebody or something of that nature, that's a more direct justice, right? Yeah, I'm going to punch somebody in the face if somebody's jumping on a person and they're hurting somebody or oppressing the weak or whatever, right? That being said, it's also not a place where if you're offended by something that happened, you didn't die and you can still be offended. And did you need to be offended? I mean, there's a balance, right? And I think Baron Antonio was great, and he said somewhere in the middle of justice is you're doing the right thing, right? And you're helping people and you're making it better. And then there's you're burning witches in Salem's Lot, and that's not what you need to be doing either. And I think it's important to keep that balance, because real justice seeks redress. And without redress, you haven't got justice. And I think redress isn't just punitive. So,
and that's why I do like the idea of the private conversations. I've gotten one of those from Duke Connor before, it's way more effective when it's calm and level, as opposed to a finger wagging in the face and screaming.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about Connor is he always makes you feel like he's trying to help you.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I admire him when he talks to people, because I feel like he does it from a good place. And that to me, by the way, Donovan, that would be that's some crossover into mercy. Yeah. And I think that's important because he gives you the benefit of the doubt, right? He is trying to, he's trying to move past it. How about other knightly virtues? How do we apply that to the SCA? Anyone else have any other questions?
Hello, Your Majesty. Rhiannon Boyle here. I have a question about when folks give up an advantage that they have gained through their prowess on the field, and how it can be seen as a gift that is graciously given, or it can be seen as patronizing, where I could still beat you even if we're both on our knees.
This is a great question. I really do like this. So, and what knightly virtue are you associating this with? Again, just to recap that. You've earned an advantage. Where do you see that? Is that mercy? Is that generosity? Where are you landing it in your own head? Just to frame it.
I'm seeing it as a conflict between generosity and prowess.
Sure. So here's something funny. Oddly enough, prowess is not on any of these lists, but we're going to cover that before this conversation is over because it's relevant to the SCA. And I want to talk about chivalry in a practical sense in all my shiv chats. So in the term of generosity, I think it's important to have an idea. When somebody gives you a point of chivalry, is it really a point of chivalry? Are they trying to keep the contest alive? Or are they being arrogant, right? And all of these things could be true and not at the same time. Somebody could be giving you a point of chivalry, and it could be being done out of pride. It could be a little arrogant, but they're also just trying to make an interesting fight. And so that person's intent has a lot to do with it, right? And I always like a point of chivalry personally when somebody's trying to preserve a great fight, right? Or somebody is trying to show a little mercy on the field. And by the way, Donovan, that's been stuck in my mind today that I didn't have a good definition for you, or that I wasn't clear on that in my own head. So thank you for bringing that up. When I say mercy, when I fight different people, I just don't go to my knees a lot. I fought the square shield for years. I got legged a lot. You can fight on your legs. You're still in the fight. I don't always give up arms. And my distinction on giving up my arm for somebody, I'd rather they just don't take my arm shot unless they're blocking their head or blocking other parts of their body with it. And then I'm smacking them in the arm and I'm not giving up anything because I think they're got the 10-minute warning. They are basically abusing chivalry, or it's a chivalry trap. Do you drop it or don't you drop it? Are you unchivalrous because you didn't drop your shield? And it's kind of a shiv trap, right? And I don't, I very famously, by the way, I finaled in a crown against somebody. He came out with a buckler. He'd fought all day with a buckler. And by the way, he'd spent the last year fighting with a buckler. And he kind of wandered into finals fighting with a buckler because he had been doing it for a year. And a bunch of other knights said, I should beat you with a buckler and not fight you with my big shield. And they went out and fought him and got smoked because they weren't practiced in the form. And it was kind of funny. And then I showed up with my shield and I'm like, if that's what you're bringing to my gunfight, let's go. Smoked him. And I say it lovingly. He was a good guy. I liked him. I mean, I was not a knight that I had respect for. But at the end of the day, I'm doing Crown's business and I'm not playing a shift trap game with this guy, right? And so I would say to you, if you're trying to keep a fight going and make it fun for everybody, you're dead on. You're in the right place. You can be generous. You can give up anything. If it's a good friend and you're trying to have a moment with somebody, I think that's great. If you're doing it because you don't think somebody is worth your full attention, or you're trying to humiliate them, you're in the wrong place, right? And the last caveat I would put on that is I see a lot of senior fighters drop on their arm or their leg or trying to pull another fighter into it. And like Her Highness said, to give them courage or to bring them up into the fight. And I think that's noble as well. And so, like many things in chivalry, there's no pat answer, but I hope, does that cover it for you? You're muted, so maybe that wasn't a good answer. I don't know.
Sorry, Zoom. Thank you for that conversation. Thank you, Your Majesty.
Do you think it's something that's happening to you, or is it something you're looking for a way to do for others out of curiosity?
I'm 5'3", and so when I gain an advantage through prowess, then because I step on the field often at a disadvantage physically, I struggle with with graciously receiving someone dropping a shield when, like, I've lost my shield arm, or also being open to that with someone who, like, is taller than me, has a longer reach and that sort of thing. Me giving up when I've gotten their shield arm, me giving up my advantage that I gained through prowess.
Okay. So I can tell you this right now, and I mean this sincerely, right? Rhiannon, your renown is not such that if you're ever fighting a knight and you take any advantage in that man, you smack him in the head twice more and don't look back. If you're fighting a Duke God so-and-so, 3 times in the head if you can, and you do not look back. If you're fighting a friend at your own level, because truly when you're making a chivalric point to somebody, there is something in the mix of all of this that it needs to be of somebody of equal skill or whatever to make a true chivalric gift. If you gift me something and I'm like, by the grace of God, he smiles upon you and you crack me in my sword arm and now you got me left-handed. Now is your moment that armored baby Jesus has smiled upon you and you should smack me. I say this, keep your shield, get in there and do God's work on my body and knock me to the ground. And here's the deal. I'll have a great story. You'll have a great story. That's great, right? It would be less so if I did that to you because I have way more renown. Right. And we haven't talked about renowned at all. And I'm going to wax poetic about renowned. And I'm also going to talk about how Knights Council works a little bit before we wrap this today, because I want people to know. But I hope those answers frame that for you and hope that helps somebody else. Okay, guys. How many people in this thing think the Knights have conversations like this in Knights Council? We don't. It's just not really, no, we just don't really. I got to be honest. And here's the deal. I'm the king, so I can break my own sanctity of council, right? Here's what Knights Council really generally looks off. If it's on Saturday, hopefully it happens before we've all been drinking, because then way more candid answers come out. And it's bad because we could use a little more mercy in the comments, because some comments come out that shouldn't come out. But if it's Sunday morning, if it were first meeting, we are a quiet council. We do not say as a lot. But nonetheless, here's what happens. The clerk of the order comes in, and for familiarity, the clerk of the order will read all the names on the chivalry list who we're discussing on that time. And that is generally everyone who has armor that could get knighted within 2 to 3 years, right? And the knights will do the following. Find where he's at. I don't think he needs to be on the list. We don't need to talk about that guy ever, because I don't think he's ever going to get there. And they always say remove without prejudice. There's oftentimes a little prejudice, or that guy doesn't come around anymore. Let's just get him off the list. We're messing up. We got bad paperwork. And then let's talk about him. The king will then look around the circle and go, And about 60% or more, the king starts talking, unless he's loves that guy or that girl, and then he'll want to talk about him, get some feedback. And then we'll talk about that candidate. Now, this is where the knightly virtues become important, because we will then use the knightly virtues as the frame of our conversation. And that's why I'd like you to know all the knightly virtues and the variations therein. And it's important to know multiple lists. So when somebody says blah, 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 blah about the virtue of noblesse oblige, and he's also, that could mean charity, and that could mean generosity and a couple other things, it's okay. And you can reply to that and you know what he means, and he's framed it up and you can answer him, right? And that's usually as it pertains to the candidate. But we don't actually discuss the finer points of noblesse oblige like we are in this conversation. And that's why I want you to read a couple treaties on this. Antonio, I bet you is better than my rambling on. Lowell's really good, right? Find something that speaks to you, right? That you like. That's why I said Sir Nigel. I love Sir Nigel because it's a bacon wrapped history pill. It's a pill of history with bacon on it, and it tastes really good. And if you read Sir Nigel, you've got a really good understanding of a lot of what the knights are talking about. Maybe not complete, but I'd rather have a story about it than just have the rough text. Okay. Now, on none of these lists is prowess. And the reality is, in history, prowess wasn't exactly like it is in the SCA. It wasn't needed to get knighted. Money had a lot to do with it. Who your father had a lot to do with it. Having a full suit of armor most certainly had a lot to do with it, because if you had a lot of money, you could afford armor, right? Your station and title had a lot to do with it. But in the SCA, we're all assumed to be noble. And so it is an added virtue of chivalry that we all discuss. And then we will debate that topic about a candidate more than most, only because it's assumed that you're not a bad guy or a jerk to begin with. And by the way, if someone throws a red flag on your other chivalric qualities, because if you're a little handsy at night, then you're getting a red flag, and we're not talking about him, right? If that guy gets in his cups and says dumb stuff too much, happened to Miles more than once, you get a red flag thrown, you're not being talked about, right? About the time we're discussing your prowess in that, because there's almost always a debate about it and what we've seen, then that's how you get talked about. Now, the next few things I'm going to talk about, I got a couple minutes left, is prowess. It's not about being the best fighter, but it is the chivalric quality that will most be associated with you getting knighted, because it's one of the most debated. Okay. But there's an assumption that you have all these other things, or you can basically talk about these other things. That's why understanding the virtues in other formats are really important, right? But now, can this guy fight, or can this girl fight? Did they got some chops? Do they have valor? Do they have fortitude, right? And you can display that in many ways. But I'm going to talk about the most practical ways. If you want to get knighted, fight in every crown you can, irrespective of what else you got going on. Pay attention to the list. Challenge the hardest guy you can out of the gate every time until they cross you over on the list, because by doing that, you're showing that you're serious and you're trying to have hard fights. And the only way to get knighted is if the knights see you display chivalric virtues. Nobody's displaying their mercy, their generosity, or these other qualities, as well as their prowess, if they're sitting in their tent talking with their closest 12 friends at a pavilion. On the tournament field, when someone cracks you and you really want to win that fight and you take that shot anyways, you're displaying some nobility. You're playing fair. You're doing the right thing. Now, conversely to that, if you crack someone and they don't take the shot, and you pull a McEnroe and blow your helmet off your head and start doing this, right? We don't want that either, because whether that guy didn't take your shot or not, you're not being noble, right? And so the point is, pressure makes diamonds. Pressure makes knights. You cannot, on my estimation, truly know the chivalric characters of somebody unless you put them in clinch situations or pressure situations. Even in the Pelicans Council, they talk about, has that person hosted a crown level event? Have they done something big versus just sit at the gate? Because just sitting at the gate is pretty easy. But have they brought other people up? Have they done a leader? Have they done these other things? And so they're going to talk about all these other qualities. But I'm finishing this talk on prowess because it's the thing that's going to get you knighted. And I want all of you guys who are here, if you're trying to get knighted, I want you to get there. We could use a few more good knights in the kingdom. I've always felt that. There's no limit to belts and blank chain in the royal pavilion. I assure you, we want to to people. We want to get them out there. So how do you get that yes? The next thing is be open to constructive criticism. I can tell you one of the most powerful things I ever did for my squires, when someone said my squire didn't fight good enough, I sent my squire over there to do God's work upon that man's body. And if he did, that night almost always changed his mind. Connor White, a good example of, if you in a conversation said in council, you thought somebody lacked quality, generosity, franchise, had a calibration problem, you need some prowess, Connor asked you for the victory conditions because you were the guy in council saying no about his guy. And I appreciated Connor doing that because I could then go to him on my guy. Connor, how do I get you on board for my guy? You said he lacks this quality. What would you need to see? Or what does that look like to you? And that's one of the most important questions to ask another knight. What does that look like to you? Because when you ask a knight about what does charity look like to you? Like I asked Baron Antonio, what does that look like to him? And the reason was, I got the time, because he gave me a better answer. And I was unsure of my own answer. So don't be so sure in your own answer. Get feedback, be open to it, and then look for the low-hanging fruit and make correction. That's what's going to get you knighted. And that brings you into the circle. And then when you get to the circle, you're going to know how to talk about these virtues. So I've expanded and used all my time. Did you guys enjoy this, I hope? It's been great talking to you. I wish this was over a beer and a smoky fire that would chase me around the fire pit. That's how that normally works for me. But cheers to all of you. And on your path to chivalry, if you ever have a question, even when I'm not king, come slip a beer in my hand and we'll talk about it. I assure you, that's how I do it with Nick, my own squire. Let's do it over a beer, Nick. All right, guys.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
All right.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
If you guys,
Thank you.
last thing, if anybody has a follow-up question or something, you feel free to email me or Facebook it, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Your Majesty.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mercy.
Yeah, thank
Yes,
you, Mercy.
thank you,
for
Mercy.
murdering.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mercy.
Appreciate it.